My parents pushed me to give my $7,500 inheritance to my sister for her business, and she then emailed me pictures from her launch party to rub it in my face, so I decided to exact revenge. I was compelled to give away the money I received from my grandma a few weeks ago to my older sister so she could pursue her business goals. Megan, my older sister, is 5 years older than me and has always bullied me for no apparent reason. The truth is that she bullies me because she knows she can get away with it, just as she has with our youth. My parents had already warned me not to make a big deal out of things, and whenever I complained to them about Megan and her behavior towards me, they would tell me that I was overly sensitive. It was at this point that I realized my parents were simply gaslighting me into believing that this was normal behavior by older siblings and that I had nothing to be upset about. But I can tell you for a fact that Megan was far worse than other older siblings because she was not messing around with me, and what she did to me was not harmless. Obviously, when we were little, she was always trying to bring me down with her harsh comments, and my parents would tell me to quiet up, but never say anything to her, even though she was the one making me cry. That was bad in and of itself, but at least it was only verbal. But one episode, which occurred when I was 14, made me realize that Mum didn't just dislike me, she despised me. So my family and I drove to the mountains, and Megan had brought several of her friends with her. She was 20 at the time and had returned from college for the summer, so she and her friends spent all of their time together. Things had been especially bad for me since, for some reason, her friends appeared to despise me as much as she did. I suppose they were all suffering from the same mental condition, which caused them to despise others who had done nothing to them. Anyway, they were continually bringing me down, making disparaging statements about me, and simply giggling whenever I was there. I was weary of it, so I took a break from them and sat alone on the lake bank, my feet dangling over the water. Then, all of a sudden, I felt a plastic bag being thrown over my head, and someone kicked me in the back, causing me to fall into the water. It took me about a minute to return to my senses and realize what was going on, and then I saw my sister and her friends racing away laughing while I splashed in the water. Fortunately, I'm an excellent swimmer, so as soon as I recovered from the shock of it all, I removed the plastic bag from my head and swam back to shore as quickly as possible. It was the most upsetting occurrence that had ever occurred to me, and when I returned to my parents and began crying over what had happened, my sister and her friends attempted to dismiss it as a harmless prank. But the worst was yet to come. My parents laughed along with them, claiming that I was simply overreacting because I had always been a crybaby. They said that nothing would have happened to me, and my father even joked that all those swimming lessons had finally paid off. The plastic bag they had put over my head was quite small, and I could have asphyxiated and perished. Also, if I hadn't come to my senses in time and removed that bag from my head, I might have drowned. Many things could have gone wrong, yet they seemed to find it all amusing. I already knew my parents had a favourite daughter, and it wasn't me, but that episode stuck with me, and I decided that I would not regard any of these people as if they were family. My main goal was to study hard, get into college, and then leave these people since I couldn't trust any of them. Since then, I've kept my distance from Megan, but I'm forced to live with my parents, so I can't treat them the same way. I've had to be polite to them, which is part of the reason I had to give away the money I inherited 5 weeks ago, even though I didn't want to. My grandma, my father's mother, died approximately a year and a half ago, and we finally received the inheritance 5 weeks ago. She left the house she used to reside in and the majority of her money to my parents, while Megan and I each received $7,500. But I also received a sapphire ring that she had, because I had previously told her that I liked it, and she had joked about how I could have it once she was gone. It was a large sum of money, and I intended to save it for the future, but my parents informed me that Megan was starting her own business and needed to save every penny she could. They had already helped her, and now they expected me to do the same. I didn't believe it was fair because it was her business. Why should I contribute? Also, let's not forget that she has always treated me cruelly throughout my life, and now I'm suddenly expected to aid this person. I resisted, but after arguing with me for a few days, my father informed me that if I didn't help her out, he would not pay for my college tuition and wouldn't even let me return home once I went. That terrified me, and I was already frustrated with the situation, so I agreed. It was probably not a good decision to make, but I was under a lot of pressure, and I didn't think it was worth it to keep fighting with these people because I had finals coming up. And I needed to study as well, so I needed some peace and quiet, which is why, just to keep my parents happy, I agreed to give up the inheritance that I had received. After all, they were allowing me to keep my ring, most likely because they had no idea it was a genuine sapphire, because my grandmother had only mentioned it as the ring with the blue stone in her will, so I knew what she was talking about, and I was wise enough to keep my mouth shut, because it was worth a lot, which worked out well for me. So I gave up the $7,500 I had gotten from my grandma, and ended the argument. 5 weeks have passed, and I've been accepted to the college of my choosing. I'm going to start in a few months. My parents are keeping their promise to me. They will cover all of my expenses, including tuition, and because I will be living out of state, they will also pay for all of my bill. I guess giving up my $7,500 was not such a horrible investment after all, because I no longer have to worry about what I'm going to do with my money in college. Everything has been going well for me, and it still is, but I feel terrible about what I did since a few days ago. My sister hosted a launch party for her store, which she has finally managed to open. She works with the same folks she used to hang out with in college. You know, the girls who shoved me into the lake with a plastic bag on my head and thought it was funny. The three of them now own a big shoe and accessory store, and while it is rather simple, they believe they have done something revolutionary because they believe what they have created is very cute. Anyway, they have a lot of these men who will agree with whatever they say, so their pals will undoubtedly shop there, as I already know. My sister had the potential to have a successful profession, but I did something when she gave me a number of images from the launch party to rub in my face. I was definitely not invited to the event, and after my parents departed, they explained that it was an adults-only affair, and because I was 18, they couldn't bring me along. It was nonsense, but I genuinely didn't want to go anywhere. However, the day after the party, Megan sent me a number of images and a text, saying that because I had missed the fantastic party she had hosted yesterday, she wanted me to live it through the photos. And then, just to be smug, she said that she couldn't have done it without my assistance, pointing to the $7,500 that I had to give up for her. I'm not sure why, but it really grated on my nerves. When I spotted the guy in the images, I instantly went to my gallery to confirm my suspicions. I couldn't tell if they were still dating because he was only in the background of a couple of shots. Even though he had grown some stubble and gained some weight, I could tell it was her high school ex-boyfriend. This guy, Luke, began dating her as soon as she turned 19, despite the fact that he was 26 years old at the time. He attended the same high school as Megan and me, but he graduated much earlier. They had formed an internet acquaintance when she was 17 years old. He literally asked her out on her 19th birthday, which I found odd, but Megan felt it was romantic. And happily, this was the time my parents acted like normal human beings and told her that they didn't like the notion of her going together with someone who had been waiting for her to turn 19, despite the fact that he was in his 20s, like a creep. They did not want her to be out with him, but I believe she ignored them and continued to date him covertly. He was working for his father's firm at the time, but after only 6 months together, they had to split up since he was moving to live with his uncle in Montana and work on the farm after his father caught him attempting to steal from the company. She was upset, and that's when our parents discovered she was still with him, having returned home to urge my father to get him a job here so he wouldn't have to do what his parents wanted and allow himself to be shipped out to Montana and end things with her. But my father refused to listen and forced her to block him everywhere and assure him she would never speak to him again. Our house had been flipped upside down that afternoon because Megan was pleading with our parents not to force her to end her relationship with him, while also telling them that he would improve. On the other hand, my father was yelling at her for not listening to them and becoming connected with this guy who was obviously up to no good, while my mother just kept crying. Obviously, no one involved me in anything that afternoon, and I was warned not to leave my room, but I'd heard his name spoken a lot, so I began to stalk him on social media, because when someone produces such a scene in your home, you don't forget their face easily. So when I saw him in the backdrop of her photos, I knew I had to strike back at Megan because Megan and my parents did not consider me a member of the family. They'd been very upfront about the business around me, so I was aware that while my own parents didn't require much convincing, her friends' parents hadn't been as simple to persuade. They were largely pushing their parents to invest in the firm, since I believe finding additional investors would be difficult, given that they are all so ignorant and incompetent. But in any case, I knew for a certainty that the final person who had been resisting this business proposal was one of her mothers, who was a single parent and was hesitant to invest so much money in a store dedicated solely to shoes and accessories. She wanted her daughter to get a job, work for a few years, gain some experience, and then come back to this, so she didn't end up in a horrible investing situation. But Megan and her pals were desperate to make this work. So Megan was constantly whining about this woman at home. Finally, they decided to make do with what they had for the time being. And if their business took off, their third friend's mother would invest as well. That was the agreement they had worked out, and they needed to ensure that the first few months of their firm were a big success. Since they only had enough funds to last a few months, they would almost certainly require a second round of funding unless they were able to do enough business to stay up on their own. However, it was improbable that a business plan like this would break even so quickly, especially since they were so so small scale, and the fashion market is not exactly simple to crack. I understood that the remaining parent who was still holding out needed just one reason to back out of this bargain, and I knew that this secret would suffice. So I contacted her using a fictitious account and requested that she call me because I had critical information to discuss with her about her daughter's business. I made sure she called me through the Instagram call tool and didn't give her my phone number because I wanted to remain incognito. I had to wait for a few hours, perhaps because she wasn't sure if this was real or not, but curiosity got the best of her, and she ultimately contacted me. Then I told her everything I'd seen, including who the guy in the backdrop of all the images was. She didn't believe me at first, but I was able to explain that my mission was simply to warn her. After that, it was entirely up to her whether she wanted to continue investing in this firm. Then I hung up, sent her a few images of Megan and Luke from the past, and let her make the decision. I'm guessing she opted to back out and perhaps persuaded her daughter to do the same, because things have been intense since the time I made that phone call. Nobody knows I was behind it all, but Megan has been calling our parents to ask them to speak with the mother who backed out and get her to come back on board. Her friends are also upset with her since they can't believe she didn't tell them about this, and she appears to be back with Luke. But she lied about his name so that no one would recognize him. Even our parents are upset with her for this. To sum up, she's screwed since absolutely everyone in her life is upset with her, and I really want to enjoy it all, but for some reason, I can't bring myself to. I know this business was very important to her, and now I'm wondering if I was a little too petty and did something wrong. I overheard our parents talking about how disappointed they were a few days ago, and they were also upset with her and were considering abandoning her business as investors because she had breached their trust. Then it spelt trouble for her because they rarely get furious with her, so this was something completely different. And I don't know, this doesn't feel as fantastic as I expected. So, AITA, you're screwing over my sister by attempting to convince a possible investor to get out of her business because she bullied me as a child update #1hello. I appreciate everyone who took the time to comment on my article with advice. I guess you're right. I might have had too much conscience to enjoy this, but I'm doing the prudent thing and keeping my mouth shut about what I did, since if my parents ever found out that I was behind all of this, they'd literally kick me out. And since I'll be 19 in a few weeks, there's nothing stopping them from doing the same. I rely on them to pay for my education bills, so I can't afford for it to happen. It's been a fortnight since my last update, and Megan's situation has deteriorated significantly because the mother who backed out of the arrangement persuaded her daughter to do the same, leaving only the two of them. But her other buddy is furious with her and demands that they split the business shares 55-45 since she has lost faith in Megan after learning about this hidden boyfriend who stole from his father's firm. She had introduced Luke to them as this guy she had met on a matchmaking app a few months ago and had been with ever since. But after her friend's mother exposed the reality, she was still attempting to tell that tale, but no one believed her. She even attempted to pass the images off as phony, claiming that someone had edited them to make her look like a liar. So she's been visiting our parents virtually every weekend, and they've scolded her for what she did while still trying to help her. Every morning, the three of them meet with their lawyer to try to figure out how she may avoid losing her interests in the business. There is a good risk that they may have to close down due to this disagreement if they are unable to fix it fast. And I'm not sure how I will feel about that, but to be honest, I've just decided to avoid thinking about it altogether. The only positive outcome of the scenario is that because Megan is in trouble, no one is paying attention to me anymore, so I can come and go as I please and do anything I want. It's good. It's taken the focus off of me. And even when Megan comes, she ignores me because she's too preoccupied with her own situation, and my parents don't say anything to me either. So this is how I'm spending my last few weeks at home before leaving for college, and it's been amazing so far. I don't have to answer to anyone about what I do during the week, and I honestly believe that if I don't return home for a few days and wind up spending more time at my friend's house than at my own, my parents and Megan will not notice. As previously stated, this is the one positive outcome of the scenario, and I hope they will leave me alone until I am ready to attend college. I'm also hoping that this circumstance has no effect on my parents' decision to pay for my college expenses, something I hadn't considered before, but when penning this post, it occurred to me, if it happens, I'll be screwed, but at least I'll have the comfort of knowing Megan has it worse than me. Update, #2. So about 3 weeks have passed since my first post, and nothing significant had happened to me until this week, so I assumed I was safe, but I no longer believe so. Anyway, a couple of days ago I believe the woman I had called succumbed to the pressure and told Megan how she had discovered this former relationship. She didn't tell Megan the whole truth, but she did tell her that she found out about it through an anonymous phone call and a few images. Megan is no longer trying to disguise the fact that she knew and used to be with him and didn't actually end her relationship since, at this time, no one is stupid, and everyone knows she didn't meet him on any dating app. and the photographs were real. When she learned that there was an anonymous phone call involved, she obviously thought of me first. So when she came to visit us yesterday, I had the misfortune of being downstairs since I'd planned to hang out with a buddy and was about to go. But she stormed into the house and shoved me as hard as she could as soon as she spotted me. I lost my balance and rage, and I shoved her back. Then she grabbed my hair and began shouting in my face, stating she knew it had to be me who had made the phone call, and she was going to make sure I paid the price for doing so. I was terrified, but I couldn't express it on my face, since she might have discovered the truth, and I wanted to cling to the fact that it wasn't me. So I began yelling at her, saying that it wasn't me, and that I wouldn't know who to talk to because I'd only seen her friend's parents once, when they all came over for lunch a few months before they opened the business. Of course, I was lying through my teeth, but I tried to sound as convincing as possible. After a few seconds of screaming at each other, our parents intervened and finally got us to separate. But Megan said she didn't believe a word I was saying and was certain that it was me who had ruined her chances of a career in business. And she demanded that I let her and my parents search my phone and laptop. I had mentally prepared myself for this, but I still pitched a fit because simply agreeing to it would appear suspicious. Anyway, I had nothing to be concerned about because I had wiped all of my gadgets free of any trace that might point to me as the person who had made that anonymous call. Furthermore, Megan assumed that I had made a phone call from my phone number rather than an Instagram account that I had created, particularly to reach her friend's mother, and subsequently deleted, so she was totally off in the first place. And even after she and my parents searched all of my accounts on various social media platforms, they found nothing. When she couldn't find any evidence to back up her accusations that I had told her friends about her past with Luke, she freaked out and began ranting at me, claiming that I had purposefully erased all of my gadgets and that she knew it was me. I battled with her, telling her that she had lost her mind since she was about to lose her business, but she had no right to blame me. Things eventually calmed down and she began to cry. I thought I was safe, but my parents chose to speak with me and stated that they could not locate any evidence to establish that I was the one who leaked this information. Nonetheless, they believed Megan since she appeared to be very certain about it, and there was no one else who might have known about it, despite the fact that they had been at the party and seen Luke but had not recognized him. So it couldn't have been them, and that left just me, because Megan had sent those images with Luke in the background to irritate, and it was apparent that I would have responded. And then exactly what I feared occurred. They warned me that even if they couldn't locate any proof, they knew it was me and would cancel their intention to pay for my education expenditure. So now I was on my own, and they didn't want any more debates over this. Then it was my turn to scream and wail, but nobody noticed because I wasn't Megan. After approximately a half hour of begging, shouting and crying and still no reaction from their end, I returned to my room, barricaded myself in, and began writing this update to distract myself. I still have the sapphire ring that my grandmother left me, which I could sell, but I'm not sure if it would cover all 4 years of college. So I'm thinking about taking out a student loan and asking someone in my family to co-sign because, as I previously stated, there's only a couple of weeks until the payment deadline, and I can't risk anything. Even if I can cover the first semester by selling the ring, I'm not sure about the remainder, and I'll have to come up with something. Update #3. Hello, so a lot has happened since my last update. It's been a fortnight since I posted, so let me begin by discussing what happened to me. So I left my parents' house a few days after my last post since, now that they weren't paying for my college education, I had no reason to stay or communicate with them. I packed my belongings and departed to live with a buddy of mine. I'd already discussed it with her, and she said I was welcome to come live with her family. She was on a gap month, and after living with her for a few days, she and her parents told me that she wanted to start working at her father's business. Thus, she had no desire to attend college in the first place, but her parents had set aside a college fund for her, which I could utilize for the time being. I tried to decline, but they persuaded me because her parents had known me for a long time and said it was as good as sending their own daughter to college, and I honestly couldn't say no to such an offer. So I took them up on it, and while I'm sure they don't expect me to repay them, I'm going to make sure I do. I am currently at university, and I didn't even have to sell my grandmother's ring, so I am quite grateful to my buddy and her parents. Megan did not fare well, as she ended up selling all of the company's share, and her friends now own the entire store. She had to cut her losses and leave because it was clear that no one could really trust her any longer, and my parents couldn't do anything about it because it was absolutely out of their hands. She's probably furious because this whole thing was her idea in the first place, but I suppose she should be relieved because I don't think the store will do well in the long run. Anyway, it's none of my business because I no longer have contact with them. I'm just going to concentrate on my future now.